Welcome back to Timo's Dinky Detailing. Today I'm going to be doing a difficult vehicle. This is a Bedford refuse lorry, and this one is in particularly bad condition. It's got damage to the casting, at least on the one casting. We've got two castings on this one, and it's got a thick coat of paint, very heavy paint on it. So let's see if we can even get this thing apart. So you can see it's got most of its parts. Some of the parts look like they're damaged. That actuator for raising the tipper is so coated in paint it's missing parts. It's probably not salvageable. This one's got the tip sliding doors. They sort of move a little bit, but they've been painted and they look like they're sticking all over the place. There's this little piece broken off of the back. Try and put that back on. There's damage to that casting, and there's no door on the back. I'll have to produce something that looks like the original. Now the base on this one is not held in with any rivets. It's held in with these sheet metal tabs. This is from the old days when they used to make these cars out of sheet metal, and they were all put together with these little tabs that are then put through a slot and then bent on the other side. And those kind of disappeared in the late 50s, and they were replaced by these die-cast toys, but this looks like it's left over, and it's on. I've had it on other vehicles. A tow truck had these things holding the base on. So there, once those are undone, then the base comes off. This one, it's interesting that there's a little hook on the casting, and you got to pull the thing out. And there's no slot in the front. It's just the hook on the back of the axle holder. So there's the mechanism. This is for tipper, and that mechanism has this gear, and it turns. There's like a twisted piece of flat steel, and as you turn it, it raises and lowers the tipper. I could replace that. That one is rusty, but it would cost a lot of money. I'm going to probably try and do something else. So there's a piece of sheet metal that's on the base of the tipper portion, and it's got two rivets holding it on. So I'm using the Dremel tool with that tiny little carbide burr to get those rivets off. And to get in there, you can see I used a knife. I tried other ways, but that was the only way I could get the thing off. Now these sliding doors, a bit sticky with all that paint, so I'm hoping once I've redone the thing that those doors will work properly. And the rear axle, I just want to get those wheels off, so I just filed off the mushroom on the one end. So I can't really go any further without getting the paint off of these things, and it's very thick, and I'm skeptical that even the caustic soda is going to get it off. So I'm putting it all in there, including the hubs, and I go outside as usual and put in boiling water straight from the kettle, and my caustic soda wasn't enough. I'll go again. I left this out there for, I don't know, hour and a half, and it started to get the paint off of it. You can see what it's done. The paint is very durable, and it's held its own, but it's loosened up, at least on parts of it. It's very thick coating of paint. I don't know what the heck kind of paint, and what did he do? Dip it into a can of paint? And then this part here at the back, the whole thing was a nightmare. And I'm thinking, when I'm watching this, I'm thinking, why didn't I scrape off a bit of it and then just put it back into more caustic soda and do it 2 or 3 times until it all comes off? But I didn't. I went and I scraped off every little bit. In the end, obviously, I got a wire brush. I don't know if it speeded it up, but once the bigger pieces were off, it made more sense. And I'm showing a lot of it so you don't get the impression it was easy getting this paint off. Now the whole thing was bent, so I set up this to unbend it. I unbent it a little bit too far. So I adjusted that again off camera. Now for the tipper portion, it's got this steel bracket, and you can see that the casting is bent. I'm going to have to straighten that out. But I got to get that steel out of there, and it's held on with 2 tabs and a rivet, and it's loose on the rivet. So the rivet, the head is mushroomed, but this whole frame is kind of floating in there, and probably has something to do with the way it set up so that there's clearance so that those doors will actually work. So it's actually pretty difficult getting these things off. It's a thicker sheet metal than the normal type of sheet metal, like the other, like the base was. It's a much thicker material, and it doesn't want to bend as easily. So this little mushroomed rivet, it's kind of loose. I thought, why don't I try and squeeze the thing? Because the casting is soft enough that you can squeeze it with these pliers. So I just kept going to a different angle and squeeze it, until it was small enough that the frame fell out of it. Now to get it through that slot there, and you can see that casting is pretty ragged. So I straighten those little tabs so it might be easier when I go and put it back together again. I cleaned up all of these parts. I don't think I show it all because it's a long video as it is, so some things like rust removal is not depicted. It just takes too much time to show it. And there I'm using a hammer to tap out these parts, straighten out those doorways. Now this is the sheet on the bottom of the tipper, and you can see it's pretty heavily damaged. And on the back here, the back angle there is folded all the way over and then squashed. So it's had some pretty rough play, I would say. And here I'm going to straighten the base, trying to just squeeze it in the vise, but it's not going to do it. The best way to do these sheet metal parts is to hit them with the hammer, and believe it or not, you can get the thing straight just from hitting it with the hammer. So now they're folded over parts, so I can't get the pliers in there. I can't get my small screwdriver in there, so I'm left with using a box cutter blade. And there you can see I'm standing it up, put the blade there, and hit it with the hammer until it comes out, and that worked. I was kind of surprised. So you can see once I got it out of there, I can sort of straighten out the back of that thing. Of course, I want to try and get it to the same contour that it started out, but of course it's work hardened from being bent over, and it doesn't want to bend in the same place that it bent before. It would rather bend a softer part of the metal. So I do my best here and try and get it, and it does come a little bit better. Now that little part that you saw at the beginning, that's a little part. Usually what happens with little parts and me is that it falls on the floor and it's gone. And this was sitting on the counter, and I was doing some work, and my forearm must have gone on top of it, and when I lifted my forearm, I could feel it peel off of my forearm and go to the floor. So I had to replace it with a piece of polystyrene, and this is being put in there with JB Weld, so that's got to sit overnight, but I could use it also to fix up that base. So here's the next day. The tape that's holding that piece of plastic in place can now come out, And the JB Weld is surprisingly strong, even though it's only on one side of that thing. So it's not the perfect repair. Here I 3D printed a back door for the thing. I found pictures online what it looked like, and then I created my own reproduction. So I got to go in with file and with sandpaper and try and smooth out the JB Weld. Now here's this little gear mechanism. And I'm thinking maybe I just put it in there and it'd be non-functional. And I could certainly get the look of it, but I somehow wanted to make it functional. So I figure, okay, what can I do instead of this fancy little thing that would cost, I don't know how much, I didn't check the price of it, but if it's available, I'm sure it's not cheap. It's quite the detailed assembly. It's certainly not salvageable. The gears are all worn out and damaged, and it's very rough. So the front grille is a separate piece. I could just leave it there and tape around it and paint it, and I've done that before, and thinking, well, why not just take that front off? And I ground part of like there's a little butterfly thing where they spread the little wings, and it holds on to the other casting, so I just ground a bit of it off. I ground more of it off later so I can glue it on easily. Now here's where the tipper is. This had a little piece of wire, straight wire going through there, but it's smaller than the 2mm axle shafts, and I don't have any of that material, so I'm going to put in a piece of 2mm axle. So I'm drilling these holes out a little bit bigger so I can just do that. It's the simplest solution, because then I can just use the materials I already have. So that's an easy job. Here's a long axle that I have from another project, and I'm just going to test it out here. There we go. And there you can see how it tips. So now I want to look for some wire so that I can bend up into a little lever to lift the tipper. And the only wire I could find in my shop was some electrical wire, so of course that's pure copper. It's very soft. But this is a toy that's going to be mostly on display, and now you're probably wondering, why didn't I just put it together and make it look like it's working, because it's just going to be on display anyway. But I don't know, maybe I'm crazy doing these things. So I wanted to show you a bit of the process because it's kind of interesting making this design. So there I bent it around. I'm mostly using the tools that you've seen me use many times before. That's what I have on my desk. So now that's going to have to be bent so that it's going to lie flat. Back to the bench vise. Now I'm using, this is a thing for working with sheet metal for ducts. It's a seam flattener or something. That's a particularly old tool, but it's good for this application because it lets me hold both those wires at the same time, so I get them started bending all together. So there you have it. Now I was thinking I would make a crank, and I do make a crank, and then you're going to see I changed it into a little T-shaped thing instead, because the crank was probably a pretty dangerous thing to have on that toy, because sticking out, a little piece of pipe like that. A child can fall with that. I had a neighbor when I grew up who was blind in one eye, and he had been running with a toy tin car where the wheel had come off and there was an axle that was he was holding, and fell and lost the eyesight in one eye. So I don't want to have that thing sticking out in any case. So there's what the original looked like. And what I got to do is make, because that thing pivots as the tipper goes up, it has to pivot. So that's why it's held kind of loosely in there. So I made a little 3D printed pivot rod there. And here the end I've bent to a T shape. And so I'm just putting those in with JB Weld. At this point I was already thinking I'm putting way too much work into this project. It's a very challenging one because the casting on the tipper is not repairable. And then I've gone to the trouble of making this tipper thing, and I have to have something that grabs the tipper, pulls it back down again, and doesn't let it fly right over the top. So I made up this little thing out of a piece of scrap aluminum, and you'll see how that works later. So the front grille is originally black with these silver stripes holding the radiator in place. And so I've taped up the casting, and then also the headlamps, instead of tape, they're like little domes. So I'm using this taping liquid, which is kind of a rubbery stuff, but it's good. It can, in this application, I could spread it. So there, it's been painted, and I don't have good video of taking that tape off. But here I take off those little rubbery things. And I've got my headlights. I polished those headlights ahead of time so that they would be shiny. So here's that back flap, whatever it's called. And I painted that one black, and at the same time I had the black paint out, I painted these other parts. And now we go to the main castings. So the base gets the satin black, and the castings are getting spray bomb paint. It's a big surface. I didn't want to use a whole bottle of hobby paint for this, and I can do this very quickly with a spray bomb. And I have the color that looks just perfect to me. This is a kind of a high visibility work vehicle color. Now these little doors, all I did was I buffed them up on the buffing wheel. I was going to paint them, and I said, you know what, I like the metallic look. I'm surprised Dinky didn't just put them there as the plated metal, because they actually look pretty sharp. Even though there's wear on these ones, I still figured it looks better than if I try to paint it. So that's what I've done. And then plus I figure it's gonna be more easily sliding. If it doesn't have paint, it might stick to the other paint. So to get this thing back on, I'm gonna have to bend down those tabs. So I've put the thing on a bar of aluminum, and I'm thinking, well, that aluminum's just gonna, the whole thing's gonna fold over if I try to hammer down those little tabs. So I'm protecting the paint here with tape, and I put that aluminum block, just scrap metal, into the vise, and then I'm taping the whole assembly down. So that's firm enough so that the thing's not going to fall off by accident. And I go with a punch and tap it with the hammer until it's flush. It's flush mounted. There's a little cavity there shaped like the tab, so it goes in there and it's nice and flat. go back to the bench, take off all this tape, which was effective in protecting the paint from me with my clumsy punch. And now I decanted some of the spray paint into a cup so that I can paint those little tabs. And I had to paint like 2 coats because the stuff's very thin when it comes out of the can. I was surprised. So here I'm measuring my axle. This is my 2mm stainless steel tubing, and I put it into my collet with a 2mm collet adapter and cut the axle off with the Dremel tool. And then I use the file to clean up the end, clean the burr off of it, and then I clean the burr off the inside just by spinning this little, it's a burr. Taking a burr off with a burr. So of course there's 2 axles. There's also this is for the tipper, the door on the back of the tipper. And for these axles, I've got to put the mushrooms on the ends, and that's these little nails. All these parts are available in various places. These are from Amazon, and you can see the links when you look below. When you look below, you'll also see there's a new feature I have, Buy Me a Coffee. I had it on the previous video, but the link wasn't working properly, but it's working properly now, so feel free, if you enjoy these videos and want to make sure they keep coming, then buy me a coffee once in a while and make me happy. That would be great. So here's how I'm doing windows these days. This is plastic from some product packaging. I think this was from a Christmas card box, but I've used boxes for croissants from the grocery store, and various different pieces of plastic. As they come through, if I see one that has a nice, very smooth, clear look, then that's going to be perfect for these models. So I save little bits of this plastic packaging, and then now I'm putting tape on them so that the plastic doesn't get damaged as I'm cutting it and adjusting the size and everything else. And so I've got my interior that I 3D printed, and I've put slots. I put slots in all my interiors now so that I can put the windows in, so I don't have to glue them in or something. In most cases, I'm able to do it very easily. So I put some decals on there to try and make it look good. I apologize to anybody at Exeter City Council. I'm not implying that they're garbage. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but then I realized it might be insulting to somebody. I had 3 different sizes of tire. I used the biggest ones. These ones I purchased from Steve Flowers some time ago for this very sort of use, to use on a truck. And I'm running out of tires. I probably have to order some more tires from them, and they're linked below. They don't pay anything to me, but they are great. If without them, there's many things you wouldn't be able to do, so we got to keep them in good shape. So now the front radiator will go on with the headlight assembly. I ground away most of those butterflies. There was no way to pop it back in that would be comfortable for me, so I figure I'd just put some glue on there, and that's just fine. There's my windshield. I adjusted it, made sure that it was fitting, and then I can take the tape off, and now it's time for assembly. So in it goes, and I've put in that lifting lever, and here are the axles with the wheels, and now the base. I've got to get that over the axle and then under that little clip, and then push in those tabs. Now to bend those tabs down, everything's painted there. I don't want to scratch it up. So I'm thinking, well, how am I going to push those things down? So I got a piece of bamboo stick these are from the long cotton buds that I have. And so I use one of the sticks. So it's like a little bamboo stick, but it's soft enough that it's less likely to scratch any paint. And it doesn't scratch any of the paint, so it worked out very, very well. So here's my the back the flipping open door of the tipper, and all I did was I put some putty on the casting. There was some fancy mechanism that I've just got rough pictures, blurry pictures so I don't even know how it works, but the casting probably wouldn't hold it anyway because it's so fragile. It had some kind of a bar that bent around, and then it was held in with screws or something in these tiny little holes, and there's no way I'm going to be able to reproduce that. And so I'm just going to glue them in place. So here I'm doing it at the same time as I'm gluing the base on. I didn't drill for screws. I said that's really hard for me to hold that thing and drill because it's round on the other end, so it just rocks. So I'm just going to put this on with glue. Like the rivets are there so that they'll hold it in place, and the glue will keep it in. And then now this is the same batch of glue, so I've got 5 minutes to get this all done. That's why I prepared this door in advance, because it's just going to be glued on top of those two little saddles I made from putty. Now for the remainder of reassembly, I've got to get that bar with the tipper into it, and I got one more axle here, and I didn't show cutting this one, but I realized that I forgot to cut it, so I didn't do that one on camera, but it's the same process. I cut the right length of the 2mm stainless steel tubing, and I put a little mushrooms nail in there, and there you can see how it works. And these little doors, you can see I opened one of them, and obviously the other one opens absolutely perfectly. So this is where we started. You can see what a mess it is. It's a nightmare. Let's see what it looks like now. Alright, well, I would say that looks certainly better. It's got the red wheels, it's got the yellow high visibility body. I think it looks quite attractive. I mean, it's attractive as it can be, because the reality is that the tipper bed on this thing, it's ugly. And I suppose I looked at pictures, and I found some pictures of these things, and in real life, lo and behold, the garbage truck is ugly. But anyway, at least it came out in the end, something I can put on a display shelf. Not the most beautiful model in the world, but and certainly a challenge. This is a very challenging model to rebuild, I would say. Maybe that's the most difficult one I've ever done. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Timo's Dinky Detailing. Until next time, be seeing you.